I probably have to go soon.
Okay,
It's
then we'll lightly talk on student loan relief, and we can go in more detail in a
yeah.
future episode. Um, so that's everybody's favorite thing to talk about. Um, uh, I have lots of thoughts. I'm actually going to start off quiet on this one and why don't you give us some context and stuff and your initial opinion, then I'll talk for a couple hours.
Well, we talked about AOC earlier, but she's her and Bernie Sanders and kind of that group is really pushing for, I think it's like 50,000 a borrower, and it's which is not going to happen. So, and then I think Biden's talking about 10% or 10,000. So it's just I I think a lot of people would like it that have student loan. That I think also a lot of people are frustrated because it doesn't do anything to affect or really change the system of why it's so costly in the first place. And like I'm just amazed at how much college costs these days. It's Is it really worth it for most people? Like
No.
it's yeah. So I it's even with top tier universities, like it's a lot of people, it's is it really worth it, right? So like I know that some of the university statistics in recent years have been relooked at, and then they pulled like hedge fund managers out, and there wasn't really necessarily a big income bump up from it. But it's just hard for me to see um, people like one of my friends graduated from private law school, so he spent quite a lot of money on his law degree. And I remember while he was in law school, he was like, I'm really afraid for some of my classmates because they're studying topics that you make like 40 grand out of you know law school with a JD in this. And like I don't see how they could ever pay it back because there's really no money there, and they're paying 80 grand plus a year for their law school degree. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just like it's um
Is it only 80 grand a year for? I think that might have been like maybe 20 years ago for Harvard.
well, this wasn't for Harvard, but
Oh, okay, okay. Because it's
but
about $500,000 to go to law school right now at a mid tier, low tier law school.
yeah, which is outrageous.
Yeah,
And
that's a for a 3 or 4 year program.
there's so many lawyers. So which it, it just it seems like unethical, I think, in many cases. And in my opinion, and like I'm sure you have some comments on like that stuff too. So
Yeah, so I come from a lot of weird mixtures. I know you went and got your master's degree and stuff. I don't know if you have any student debt remaining or if you've already taken care of all that and you're
yeah.
like, Psh, bye Felicia. Um,
No, I don't.
so congratulations on that,
Thank
jerk.
you.
Um, um, so I went into a private college, and it was the least expensive private college in the United States. It's still among the bottom tier for private colleges price wise. Southern Nazarene University. Um, I mentioned that because I want to make sure people understand that it. And then it was still way too expensive. I mean, it wasn't Harvard, it wasn't uh, Columbia or something, but it was still at the time. It was only basically $16,000 a year or $8,000 a semester to go to. And that was when I started in the late 90s, like 97, 98 year was 16,000. After fall of 98, I stopped going to school for 3 years. came back, and the cost was, I want to say it's about 13,000 per semester. Um, and that was only 3 years later. Now it's approximately 20 something thousand a semester,
Wow.
and this is for 12 to 17 hours, and some other stuff. That's not necessarily including room and board. Um,
Yeah. It's crazy.
and so on top of that, going to a small, cheap private college, I studied theology and ministry, which is not generally a moneymaker.
Yeah.
If I would have gotten out of it just with 4 or 5 years of what I originally went in for, so 16 a year, 32, so approximately 68,000 ish, give or take a little bit. It At the time, the salaries and stuff, it would have taken about 4 or 5 years. Well, I'll be a little bit nicer. 3 years if I gave my full salary as a pastor for my denomination at the time. That I didn't make any money at all from the church, and they were paying me full time. If I paid that back, I'd be able to pay off those loans. So 20,000 ish a year for the age and the education. That's not including going to higher level like seminary for stuff. Well, I went to a church that paid me $200 a month coming out of college.
Yeah.
My student loans were like $377 a month. And I did some really stupid things. I didn't pay them. I defaulted. There's a lot of whole stupid stuff that I definitely did wrong. Now I mean, I've been paying them and stuff. I have a couple cool things. I think about, well, maybe it's not as much as I thought. I think it's like 47,000 now. I've got it down to, because I'm a government employee. Once I have paid 120 months, consecutive months of my student loans, I can apply to have my student loans forgiven. Now, it's a lengthy process. It's not a guarantee, but being a government, or if you're a teacher, that's usually the ones that you hear about the most. And I'm definitely going to apply for it when I've got my 120th month. I was actually working for a couple of years before I started, because we just weren't used to making money. So we weren't able to pay our student loans initially. So there is a forgiveness program for the government, depending on when you went to college and how many years of public service you serve in. And I think that also applies to some lawyers, not all, but I don't know if that applies to law school or if it's just bachelor's degree. But I wasn't smart enough to get scholarships, either smart enough to apply for them or smart enough to just been given them. I
Yeah.
didn't work hard enough. That all being said, my wife, we got all her stuff paid off. She did have a lot of scholarships. She actually graduated early, which made it a lot nicer. I think we owed a total of 3,000 for her, after her 3.5 years of college at the same college, and she had the higher rates from the beginning. So scholarships definitely played a part of that. And $3,000 is nothing. I mean,
Yeah. Totally.
especially when you look at the average credit card debt of a college student is higher than their tuition or their school tuition debt. And it's like a $67,000, $80,000 is what they were saying 10 years ago for the average college graduate is what their credit card debt was. So student loan debt's much better than a credit card debt, even though it still sucks. I have mixed feelings about forgiving student loans on multiple different levels. And I also have a lot of feelings about college in general. I learned how to learn in college.
Yeah.
But it wasn't my first time through that I learned how to learn. The first time through, I didn't take it seriously. And when I did take it seriously, it was only in spurts. In fact, it was kind of a blessing, other than the fact that there were student loans and broken agreements and stuff, of flunking out when I did. And I know most people that go to college aren't as bad as I was that first time around. When I came back, after one semester, I was really thinking about dropping out properly, like not flunking out, but choosing to not go to school anymore.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at how much it was costing. I mean, I was actually, Brenda and I were dating at the time, and I was looking at the cost per per day of being at college as opposed to going and working at Walmart, and thinking, man, Walmart is the thing right now with their $8.25 an hour. um, that's how that, and it really worried me. I eventually got through and was able to get some scholarships that did help pay a good chunk, um, for lots of different life reasons. It took me a little bit longer to finish. I had one semester forgiven, which was nice. But I don't think most people that go to college understand what the purpose of college is.
Yeah.
Um, and when I lived in the small towns as a pastor, they always looked at college was just a place you went to be able to learn how to make more money. And they looked at purely as a money factory, not as a place that you learn how to learn. In fact, that phrase "learn how to learn" really kind of irked them. They're like, "Well, you just think you're smarter than us." It's like, no, because they can tell you stuff about cows and steers and bulls and stuff. In fact, I went to a seminar once on that, and it was crazy, like the science behind it. And these are farmers that most of them might have a high school education. Some of them did get a college degree, but they know stuff deep. This group didn't have a college education because that's why they thought I was all fancy schmancy like you. And but they had knowledge that was way beyond, especially their science knowledge was way beyond what I knew. And that was actually kind of cool to see someone that works with the land, works with the cattle and stuff, knowing stuff. And I'm like, oh, I went to college and I know crap, and you guys know crap because you studied the crap that comes from your. In fact, the guy that was leading the seminar, he had his PhD from cow studies or something, from the Ohio State University, and they're trying to sell them on a certain kind of breed of bull of bull to buy. And he says, "Look, guys, I sift through a lot of bull every day," and I just broke up laughing. And the person who brought me is like, "What?" And I was like, "He sorts through a lot of bull every day," and she's just like. And all of a sudden my whole table's laughing and they're like, "What's wrong with you guys?" And I'm like,
So funny.
I don't, I know that the industry standard for a lot of jobs, you have to have a college degree or you have to have a master's degree. And in some of those fields, it's absolutely worth it. Like right now, we thought that there was going to be too many counselors and psychiatrists and all that stuff before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And now there's a dearth. There's not enough. We thought there might be too many teachers that have the degrees for teaching, and we're finding out there's not enough, so there are some things that I think college is better suited for. But my daughter, we're not encouraging her to go to college straight out. If she wants to go, then she can definitely earn her way. We're encouraging her to go to a trade school, try to pick up stuff, do stuff like that before going in, because college is way too expensive. And the reason why makes sense if you look at it. If you're paying a professor $40,000 a year, which is nothing. I mean,
we're like 140,000.
Some, yes, but when you're starting out with the lower things and stuff, you have to earn your way up to getting those prices. You don't just automatically get those huge salaries. And we're talking about a lot of the even like OCCC and stuff. Like they don't pay. Oklahoma City Community College, for those who don't know, they're not making $140,000 as full-time professors there. And you usually have to work your way up unless you just have those connections. Well, if you've got 10 people in a department, that's a lot of money. And all of a sudden you've got to market that department. Well, that's a lot of money. They're not counting your staff, your like secretaries and stuff, who definitely don't make whatever the professors they make at most half of that.
Yeah.
And they offer these things like, well, we're not going to charge you tuition if you work here, but then you don't ever have enough time to finish your degree because you're doing all this other stuff. I mean, it's, then you've got to pay for all the maintenance and everything of maintaining the college, because we're looking at it as a place to be, as opposed to, one of the things I think online learning has definitely presented an opportunity is for colleges to stop looking at everything like wasting money on some stuff that just doesn't matter. But then I say that, and we have this thing called NIL, name, image, likeness, going on, where athletes can get paid for their use of stuff. So, in the same way of all the other stuff we've talked about tonight and recently, if we really wanted, world peace, we could probably get it just with the money that from boosters going to these colleges and stuff. Um, and I was a college athlete my first year. I actually got a very small scholarship to throw shot, disc, hammer, and javelin, and it was always so funny to me, like when you see these things, because um, the amount of money that gets paid to have a track and field program could take care of like some of the future scientists, like a whole class of scientists per year, like just the money being spent on it. And we're not even talking about the big sports. We're talking about some of the smaller
Yeah.
sports and stuff. Um, but there's always this thing of where college has some kind of allure. It's the best. It's like people think of it as the best of times for themselves. That's why they keep on giving all this money. And I'm thinking, I mean, some of them are doing it cool and stuff. The last scholarship I ever received, I had to go to a dinner to get the scholarship, and I got to meet the person who gave it. And I didn't understand it. I actually understand it more having been your friend and talking to you. But he was talking about how he has so much money put in this endowment fund that they just take the scholarship out of the interest now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I didn't know as much about it then, but now that I've kind of looked up a little bit more, the amount of money he had to have had in there to be able to pay for the scholarship money he was giving was a lot of money, like a lot of money. And I'm like, you could have done so much more with that money, but you want your name attached to the scholarship for the next, well, allegedly perpetuity, but ultimately for 20, 30 years.
Hmm.
And you're so attached to that, that less good is going to be done in the world under your name. Um, because that's why you give scholarship money, is to, show everybody how great you are. But think about, um, what if you gave that same money to help the scientists develop something that solves a good chunk of world hunger? Maybe not all of it, or helps fight things like Ebola, something that's actually kind of accurate, helps Ukrainian, no, just, and that, of course, that's a whole other subject and go into things. But that's the problem with college, is that college, while you're there, you're in a bubble. You're focused on things that the rest of the world doesn't really think about. So, I don't know if I agree with this completely, but I remember hearing someone say that when you're a teenager, you're whatever your parents are politically. When you go to college, you become a liberal. When you get out of college, you become a Republican.
It's
I
funny.
guess nowadays they might say libertarian.
Yeah. If you make a lot of money, you do.
Yeah, and I'm
Tendency.
like, because we concentrate on sports, we concentrate on all these social relationships and stuff that some of them do matter, but they don't matter to the extent that they get pushed on you. Because I mean, there's already been enough studies showing of how education works. If colleges really wanted to educate, if that was their goal, universities, 2 to 6 week modulars would be much more effective in retention.
Like
Would
high
be
intensive.
Oh yeah, yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, I took several 2 week classes, and we went to the class from 8 a.m. till, or see, 9 a.m. till 3 p.m. with a 30-minute break for lunch. And I still retain more from those classes in those 2 week segments, even now, than I do from some of those other classes that were semester long with all the things. That's one reason why adult studies are on. I'll say adult studies. That's probably still fair, whether it's online or in person. That's why they've gone a lot more modular format with a maximum of 8 weeks,
Hmm.
even though they still don't do it right, because they separate 8 weeks of 3 hour classes every week, instead of like saying, hey, it's going to cost you $2,000 to take this class, or $500, however much it costs for the class, 2 weeks intensive, whatever shift works for you, whether it's first shift, second shift, or third shift. You go and do that class. You're going to retain all the crap. Go into your next class, do the same thing. You're going to retain more as a whole. You can still have your breaks and stuff for spring break, but people as a whole are going to learn more. And that's what they would do if that was the goal. And they would
Hmm.
actually make more money, because you can charge per class, and every single college, even the cheap ones, charge per hour. But they charge it like, if you have so many hours put together, they'll kind of block it. Now each college does it a little bit different. SNU, they did it from 12 to 17 hours. At least when I was there, it was all the same price. So if you were wise, you'd take 17 hours, but they would make more money if they just did their per credit hour, you paying $500 or whatever. just straight up. And people would do it because you're buying the hours for that specific class. Um, I think colleges are going to have to go to a model if they're going to be able to be
It's kind of like independent learning, kind of like courses that
Mhm. I think there's going to be a lot
someone
more
who's an expert.
certificates.
Yeah.
I think certificate based specialties, almost kind of like a trade school in a way, but in the areas that are not trade school. And I guess you were saying $140,000. I was also thinking Oklahoma professors, not because Oklahoma again is one of the cheapest states to live in, so they don't have to pay the professors much. Definitely, I mean, $80,000 a year in Connecticut as a salary is considered basically minimum wage, whereas in Oklahoma, $80,000 is like six times the amount of minimum wage. So,
Yeah.
so I probably should have clarified that because I those things make a difference too.
Well, so I like earlier I looked up it's on this the collegemonk.com,
Uh-huh.
which I've never heard of, but I just looked up University of Oklahoma's tuition and fees.
Hmm.
So they have in-state just tuition and fees is 11,500, and then out of state is 27,000.
And that's
So
per year or per
yeah,
semester?
per year.
Okay.
Oh, total cost of attendance. Let me see.
Yeah.
Oh, for 1 year.
Okay.
So it's yeah.
Yeah. So
So
$8,000 more semester if you're coming from out of state.
yeah, so like total cost of attendance they have at 29,000 a year for in-state, and then 45 for out of state. So like that's a public university, and um, I mean I paid substantially less than that, but it's just really, well, the room and board cost is just as expensive as the tuition and fees.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like it's just I mean that's a lot of money to be spending if you're like I've thought about almost like it should almost be if you're doing elementary education, it should be a lower cost than if you were doing computer science or something like that.
Right.
Where, because like right below this cost of fees, you have a referral site for student loan things, and they have one of the things they have apply in a little as, and then they have 15 minutes or less, 3 minutes or less, 15 minutes. So I think that's from that, I'm like, this is the lifelong thing that you're settling yourself with. It's so easy to get in it. And I don't think really people think about how expensive it is, but having not being able to shed this during in bankruptcy, for instance, you're not
Hmm.
allowed to file bankruptcy on educational debt, which I think came in under George W. Bush
Hmm.
or HW.
It was the second one.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, George W.
Hmm.
So that's, I think that would probably help with some of it. But it just seems so much like a business now.
Well, so one of my friends, he lived in, oh goodness, my mind is not there. Holland. What country is that?
You
Is
talk
that
about me?
Netherlands? No, another friend.
Yeah.
He actually moved from Oklahoma, lived in Holland for about 10 years, and then came back to Oklahoma. In fact, he's probably I work with him, and he's a very very old man. I love the dude to death. His name's Charlie. Um, he was very much a right wing person in the 60s, 50s when he was in Oklahoma. He married a lady from Holland, and then they moved to Holland so she'd be closer to her family. And he said he hated it pretty much every year he was there. And then we moved back to Oklahoma. Ever since he's wished he'd never left. And all of his kids grew up in Holland, and they're all fairly successful and stuff. And Holland has an educational system where the government pays for 100% of the education. But and however far you want to go, they will pay for it. So if you want to get 20 doctorates, they'll pay for it. But the caveat is you have to earn a high enough grade percentage to be
Yeah.
able to move on. And you can't just, so you can't do what I did. Like if once I flunked out, I would be pretty much, if I wanted to go back to school, I'd have to pay for it and earn the grade, you know, make up my grades to be able to have Holland again, eventually pay for my grades. So one of the things that, if America ever did implement something similar to that, which I don't see how we would be able to, in so many different ways, because I think two of his kids have doctorates because they got straight A, like they weren't just straight A's, but you had to do community service and stuff. I mean, it wasn't like you just got free schooling. There was a
Yeah.
higher, in fact, it was a higher cost overall per student to get that free educate or that free education, to not have to pay money for that education. But there's a higher cost than there was even for me of paying, you know, $30,000 a year out of pocket or through student loans or whatever, because I don't have to do some of those other things. I don't have to be a good citizen. You know, you're a bad citizen in Holland. Okay, you're out of the program.
Yeah.
And there's not like, oh, well, we were so you get free healthcare, but there's also rules with the healthcare. And I'm not against free education. I'm not against free healthcare, but I think that, or I shouldn't say free, the taxes are also 4 times higher, you know?
Yeah. The system needs to change before that could be possible.
Right. And he even said, because he was, when he was there, he was griping about taxes. He was griping about taxes, because he came from Oklahoma. So of all the states to go to, it was a low tax state. Then he goes to Holland, and he complained about taxes because he wasn't looking at it. He was purely looking at it from a selfish lens of what he had to pay right now.
Yeah.
And when you have a system already set up, I mean, it's similar to Israel having it where everybody serves in the military a minimum number of years. It's not so much that you have to be patriotic, though that is a byproduct that comes with it. It's that once everybody served in the military, there's other ramifications that allow for Israel to be the country that they think they need to be. In the U.S., because we're such a market-driven, capitalist type system, for good or for bad, it doesn't make sense to have to pay for education if I'm wanting just to get a job that doesn't pay me jack.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem that we do have in America, where there's not jobs available. We're not very good about actually educating our students. Hey,
Or
we
what
need to,
what we need the market.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
if we were to say like, hey, this is the areas we need people in, the best we can do is say like, hey, there's going to be jobs created. In fact, this was Google's pitch in 2000, I want to say 2007. That sounds right. 2007 or 2008. They were talking about the reason why you need to go into IT right now, telling every high school student to go into IT, because in 5 years from now, there's going to be jobs created that we don't even know what they are yet.
Yeah.
How horrible of a pitch is that? Go ahead and study something that's going to be irrelevant 5 years from now, because it's going to be a field that there's no education, but the closest you're going to get to it is by learning coding and stuff for a system that's 30 years old. Now, of course, by the time that year came around, there was some different rules and stuff, but that's the kind of way we're promoting it. And that causes problems, and I have a lot of friends in tech, at different levels of tech. And, you know, it's just as cutthroat over there as it is, anywhere else. And I'm not talking about for the Google jobs and for the Facebook jobs, but even for just basic IT jobs and everything. It's, even though there's more jobs out there, you have a lower threshold to get into those jobs. It's not as bountiful as everybody's making it out. And I think that's because of our expectations of what college and what the workforce is supposed to provide for us. I have mixed feelings about Dave Ramsey and his whole financial piece. I see some good and I see some bad with it, but it's one of the few systems out there that's actually fairly small buy-in for people to understand how money works. Even at a micro level, to be able to say, hey, you got to spend less than you bring in.
Yeah.
And that sounds like, I mean, people might, our grandparents' age and older, that's like, well, yeah.
Well, you either
That's
have
obvious.
to spend less or make more money.
Well,
to,
but again, eventually you're going to have to spend less than you make
yeah,
at some
totally.
point, or at least even to what you make. But the baby boom generation and then following, we've gotten worse and worse. And so when I hear people like AOC or Bernie, and I'm not, again, in principle, I agree. Yeah, education should be free, but in practicality, and you and I've talked about this with the depression, um, if you're not even going to value the education you're getting, and you're not willing to understand that, hey, this isn't a short, you're not supposed to get, if you're paying $40,000 a year for your education, you're not necessarily going to get a job that's going to pay you $1 million as soon as you graduate. Maybe after 10, 15 years, you might get a job like that if you don't start something brand new that and then sell it really quick or something. It, it's a miseducation of saying that college is the answer without college being ever meaning to be the answer. And we
Yeah.
don't want colleges to be that answer, because it would actually be, can you imagine a school of surgeons where their only goal is to make money? Do you think they're really going to teach them the stuff that's necessary to be good surgeons? They're going to
Well,
teach them how to market themselves as a higher priority than actually how to, use um, that blade thing. I'm not a doctor, so I don't care what it's called.
well, you have to have that in mind. I think if you're going to be spending that much money on, like, I don't, I think most people that go into law or dentistry or stuff like that have the intention of making money these
Oh
days.
yeah, and that's fine if the individual is thinking that way. But I'm saying, what if the school operated purely from a system that we're only going to teach you the law in the sense of how to market yourself as a lawyer?
Yeah,
It's still important, but we're going to, instead of actually having you understand how casework works, how the legal system works, um, the fact that you're going to be reading thousands of pages for the next 5 years, and you're going to make a crappy salary. And then after you do that, you might get the opportunity to move up and make some real money.
yeah,
Um, they're not, it would be a horrible system. Like, I mean, yes, that's the intention of whenever we're going to college, or whenever I'm taking a class, even in LinkedIn Learning. My intention is how can I use this to maximize it for my life? But that's a good way of taking any class. The problem is if I take a class on, it doesn't really matter what it is, but I take it, and my only intention is that after I take this class, I'm going to make millions of dollars, or I'm going to make a whole
hmm
lot of money. I took Guitar 101, and now I'm going to be a rock star. Like, that's just, and if the
naive.
video, yeah, well, not just naive, but if the video is like, yeah, if you just learn how to play G, C, and D, you'll basically be able to play every major popular song, and then there's no reason why you shouldn't be a rock star. Well, yeah, I mean, technically you could get away with just playing G, C, and D and becoming famous. I mean, YouTube. Um,
There's just not a lot of shortcuts. And
yeah, and
like I went to grad school in Holland too, and it was pretty cutthroat system. They have high expectations for their citizens, and there's a kind of like Switzerland too. There's high expectations, but there's also a social safety net.
mhm,
And I kind of like, if we had a system like that in the US, we would have to have really high expectations.
yeah,
And
and
I don't hear much about expectations for
well,
people.
yeah, because it brings in a different dichotomy that is not at all, but absolutely 100% related to college. And we lightly talked about teachers' salaries and stuff. Um, I don't know this for sure for Holland, but from what studies I've done of other countries, I haven't, and it's not been a lot. They don't expect teachers to be security guards and part-time nurses, and like, their job is to teach.
Yeah.
A lot of these other countries that we like to compare what they do education wise and what we do. Um, I mean, I think of all these, I don't want to ever say them because I don't want it to make it look like I'm racist or something, but there's a lot of Asian jokes about if you get a B, that you're kind of dumb in the Asian communities. Um, and whereas we still have a lot of people that, like, oh my goodness, I got a B. And we want to reward them for that, depending on, like, especially if they're stupid. You're like, yeah, you got a B, you're great. Well, no, you're still bottom tier compared to these other worlds of how they talk. but teachers have so much pressure that they're not able to teach. And they're not supposed to teach subject matter, or they can teach subject matter as long as they want up until a certain point, and then they have to teach test preparation.
Yeah.
Um, and I have a very huge soft spot. I was a substitute teacher for a couple years, um, and I have a huge soft spot for the amount of work the teachers are expected to do, and it's most of it has nothing to do with teaching.
Yeah, totally.
Um,
Very little
and
pay.
and so you have a system like that where then these people are supposed to go to college, and I don't want to discount anybody. I mean, both of my parents were the first ones in their family to go to college, and it's a huge deal. And my mom was a straight A student, my dad was not. And that, it is a huge deal to be the first person in your family to go to college in the U.S. Um, um, but it's also it's a barrier that we thought that was real. Like if you make it to college, you're going to have a career, a successful career. And in other countries, that might be true because the way the educational system is set up, the only way you can graduate college is to be set up for the career. I mean,
Yeah, totally.
your whole life is set up for that. We have, and I appreciate the empathy towards the fact that we don't want to leave children behind. We want every child to have as much of an opportunity as possible to become educated, because we do find statistically that educated countries have less problems than what they would have if they don't have any education. So women in Africa, the more education they get, the less abortions happen, the less food shortages happen, the more. So it's not. There's some very good things for education, but we're in a country where we and it really does come back to athletics to a point where we're focused more on the athletics of getting people through in their $1 million contracts with the NFL than we are of actually trying to require a rigorous structure.
Yeah.
And which is actually, this is kind of, I mean, I know our time is getting short. Maybe this, I don't know how much this will do with energy. It does deal with finance, about how colleges are kind of just factories, that the places where they actually are money factories are the
Sports.
for sports and for other special entertainment kind of things.
Yeah.
And that's starting to crumble too. So that's, I don't know if that's something that you're ever interested in talking about on a grander scale, but yeah, the problem with colleges is not the college. It's usually what's leading up to the college. And I have several friends who are teachers, and they work their butts off. They're working 60 hours a week for a 25 hours pay,
Yeah, totally.
and they spend their own money on supplies. This is all across the U.S. It doesn't really matter. I'm not a fan of charter schools personally, but even if they're at charter schools, it's not all paid for. I mean, it's still, there's, I think teachers that truly go into wanting to teach, they're screwed from the beginning, but they make the best of it. And shout out to anybody out there that's got that's a teacher, that's got a family member that's a teacher. Give them a better present next time you see them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know I probably went on a nice little rant there for 45 minutes, and it's like, oh no, Mike, I deleted it. Ah.
Well, I think the summary of this is basically that we don't get good bang for a buck as a country for educational system, and stuff needs to change. Like we started talking about college,
Hmm.
but it's, I mean, you're talking about forgiving 10,000 in debt, but if you're spending 150,000, that's very little. That's less than 10% of
Yeah,
the spend. So that's like interest, for a couple of years. It just doesn't really affect the root problem of it, and
yeah,
and leading up to that too. It's just not. It's crazy. Like I saw a statistic with New York City. I think recently it was like they spend 80,000 on average for elementary school, 80,000 per kid per year,
hmm,
and that's, where's the money going? Because it's not going to the teachers, right?
yeah. And it's, I mean, so my daughter, it's not going to be short, so cut me off now.
Oh,
My daughter is in high school now, and they definitely do rules of high school in Oklahoma. There's certain rules. Got to give money to football. Uh, but her junior high, it was very interesting. She was a part of the robotics team her seventh grade year, the robotics program, and they had four teams. I think her sophomore or seventh grade year, and the principal was a good guy. I mean, I actually had a few conversations with him and stuff. Good guy, but he didn't understand why 20 kids who are literally doing STEAM and STEM, why they needed to have a bus ride to middle of nowhere, Oklahoma for a competition 4 or 5 times a year. He thought that was an expense that was just way too much to bear. And it wasn't just him, I mean, the whole school district, but specifically like
Yeah.
the way he would argue with the robotics coach who's doing this completely for free. She doesn't get any money from it. But football, I mean, the seventh grade has its own bus, two buses. Eighth grade has its own two buses. The cheerleaders get a bus. The basketball team gets a bus. Heck, even the track team gets a bus. And it wasn't, and they're like, well, those coaches have CDLs, commercial driver licenses. And I'm like, okay, well, I have a commercial driver's license and I can drive a school bus. No, 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 no. It has to be someone from the, like, I mean, there are all these silly rules that applied for a program that actually might bring money back to the
Yeah.
school, that can help them get some more federal grants and stuff. And, he was so adamant. My daughter tried to do band, and the high school teacher was so more concerned in doing these shows and stuff that he was really horrible at doing. She's not in band anymore, so I don't care if I rip on him. And he won't listen to this. And if he does, hey, I'm Matt's sorry for you. Um, but they were spending less time focusing on how to teach the students how to play and how to do marching band or whatever, more time on stuff like trying to be like all these college programs that are doing these fancy things. So those guys had the basics plus, whereas ours were they're just trying to do the plus without the basics first.
Yeah, totally.
And that seems like that's really the problem with all of our educational system stuff. I'm for forgiveness of student loans for a teacher that's been out there for 10 years, which we have in place. I mean, so teachers can get those student loan, at least all you have to do is pay student loans for 10 years. I would almost say for teachers, especially, and this is coming from a government employee who makes less than a lot of teachers. I would even be for them to get the money that they spent on student loans during that 10-year period, that over the next 10 years, it came back to them, and I'll still pay mine. I won't do the forgiveness program, because I think if they were able to actually concentrate on teaching, maybe they can reach some of the results. Me concentrating on doing my job, I'm still going to do it because I want to keep my job. Teachers don't have some of the same protections that I have.